I knew that I enjoyed being on stage, but being heavyset, coming from a broken home, couldn't finish college. I just felt like, oh, I had this dream, like this gift inside me, but I also made this whole list of reasons, we all have them in our head, of why, oh, I couldn't do that. There's people that are better than me. There's people that are, this is more dialed in for them. So I told myself that story for a long, long time.
All right, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the 1% Podcast. I'm your host, Vin, and
I'm Shane.
And today we're here with my man, the one, the only, one of the best MCs in the world, Mr. Jimmy Hayes Nelson.
What's
welcome
up,
to the show.
Gentlemen?
Got a fighting going on here.
I know, right?
I feel like that's a fighting name that deserves.
This is good.
Deserves that intro. He's got like the fighting name. I would see him in a boxing ring, but like an old-fashioned Bear's Knuckle boxing ring, not like a new one.
Yeah. You look like the Notre Dame guy. Go this way, yeah.
Yeah, that's the old what's it called? Knockout, the old Tyson Knockout video game back in the 90s.
Yeah.
Gosh, really showing my age at this point, but then you're too young for Knockout.
I was in the 90s. What do you mean?
Do you remember that video game where you were Big Mike Tyson, or you had to fight against Big Mike Tyson?
What's his name? Fighting like Glass Joe and all those guys. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. See, Jimmy and I know.
Yeah.
Why? Yes, I just said yes.
Did you know any of those guys? Be real.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Give you a break here.
Listen, I was an old school gamer. I played all of that stuff.
That's actually a good point. All right, I do believe you now.
Anyway, okay. With that being said, this is today's special Valentine's Day episode, and the gift was Shane's wearing a red shirt, but I did something better than wear red. I still wore black, but I brought two amazing men together. That's my gift to both.
That was your gift that we bonded over sports before we started recording.
That's right. Friendship for life.
We're starting late because these two fell in love. Anyway, with that being
You're
said,
Cupid now, man.
Yeah, I know. I got a thing for this, you know. So, but enough about me and Valentine's Day and us. Let's talk about Jimmy. Jimmy, can you please go ahead and tell our listeners, which I guess is the world, who you are, what you're up to, and what you're currently building.
Absolutely. As Vin said, my name is Jimmy Hayes Nelson. Most people just call me Coach Jimmy. And been in business for 17 years. But before I got started in business, I am a former 100-pound overweight, 3-time college dropout. I always share that story of, I grew up in West Texas, a little awkward fat kid who found myself on stage one day in the first grade at a Christmas musical. And I got pushed out there, didn't want to be out there, and sang, was on stage. And it was the very first time I ever got a positive emotional response from a peer group. And I feel like that's when that seed was planted so many years ago. And really struggled growing up trying to figure out my place in the world. Like, I knew that I enjoyed being on stage, but being heavyset, coming from a broken home, couldn't finish college. I just felt like, oh, I had this dream, like this gift inside me. But I also made this whole list of reasons, we all have them in our head, of why, oh, I couldn't do that. There's people that are better than me. There's people that are, this is more dialed in for them. So I told myself that story for a long, long time, that it was one of those things that I enjoyed, but it just wasn't going to be meant for me. And finally, after dropping out of college for the third time and moving back home and with my parents in my early 20s, I kind of had an enough is enough moment. I found a time where I was waiting tables, bartending here in Dallas. I'd stopped trying to get on stages, trying to perform. And I remember there was this moment, I jumped out of the shower one day, wrapped the towel around me, and a guy that's 100 pounds overweight doesn't spend a whole lot of time in the mirror, but I stopped right there that day and I was like, dude, what are you doing? And like, who's gonna love this? Like, by that point I was 21 years old, and it was like, you're not a kid anymore. And I always joke, I'm like, Coach Jimmy wasn't necessarily born in that day, but I became open to kind of looking at doing things the other way. I wasn't really coachable. I keep a sticky note here on my desk that says, are you willing to be willing? And it's always a reminder of me, am I willing to do something different, think something different? And the moment I did, it's crazy how there's all these things around us in the universe that were already there for our disposal, or people that wanted to partner with us. We just weren't open to that. And that really started me on a journey that led me into initially the health and fitness world. I worked with Beachbody, the P90X Insanity in-home fitness people for 17 years, lost 100 pounds with them. But it's what started my speaking career as well. And they started putting me on stages to share my story. As that company grew internationally, they would send me places to help their reps learn how to tell stories better. And what I realized is my entire acting career, my 3 years at Disney World, my 4 years in New York City, it wasn't preparing me for an acting career. It was preparing me to help entrepreneurs and business owners like your viewers learn how to tell more powerful stories that tie into their products and service so they can grow their business and have a bigger impact. And that's what I do now.
I got a great question for you. Were you ever on any of those P90X videos? Because I had that in high school and I used to do it.
So P90X, I used to take the train from New York City to Philly, and I would do QVC presentations with Tony Horton when they were selling P90X. I am a cast member in the Insanity workouts. So I always joke with people, if you've ever done the Insanity workout, we've worked out together. In fact, when I was building that business, I'm only in the second month. I'm in 3 workouts in the second month. And when I was building my Beachbody business, the marketing I would use is, if you own Insanity and you don't recognize me, you've quit and we should talk. And that's where that used to be my hook for people that would buy it, and then it'd become like a paperweight when they'd have like the old DVDs, you know?
Dude, that's great. I'm going to go see if I still have those videos. And if I do, I'm about to go start doing them.
You'll find it, because
I got to be honest, I don't remember you.
This is when you go look, month 2, I'll tell you which ones, but Sean comes back to me and he goes, we're going to go back here to Jimmy because Jimmy has those good squats. So I used to be, anywhere I would go somewhere in a Beachbody thing, they're like, it's Jimmy with the good squats. And so I think we're far enough away from that branding no longer follows me. But I was super thankful for that time and that company, and really just getting reps on both a physical stage, but I was pursuing my acting career. I was working at network TV about the time that I was trying to build that business, and we shot that. And I was working on a network TV show, if you remember Ugly Betty, back in the day in NBC. And there was so much downtime that's when early days of social media. We're talking like 2007. And I was trying to have meetings and build my business and stuff in New York and do like fit clubs, and people weren't showing up. And that's when I kind of started just kind of farting around with Facebook. And that's where I started building my business. I had all these people that said, oh, you can't build a network marketing business online. And I was like, yeah, but I'm not having any success getting people in a room. And so that's where it was like, what's the storytelling things I know as an actor that I can do with video, with telling story? And that's where it kind of clicked for me. I was like, oh, once I started being able to learn how to connect with people using the skills that I teach people now online, it led me to get on more physical stages as well. And it goes both ways.
It's funny. When I met my wife 15 years ago, I remember VHS tapes of Billy Blanks. So we're talking about, some old school ones over there too. Some Tybo. Yeah. So I love your story. And I think what the big entrepreneur mindset shift was for you is you noticed yourself in the mirror and you actually made something happen. Right? You did something. That's the entrepreneur mindset. You actually took advantage of a situation and you did it. And you saw yourself through. And here you are today. Is there anything that, because I imagine during this transformation, you really, it's all mental. You really just wanted to quit. You wanted to go back to your comfortable lifestyle. There's a transitional period that a lot of entrepreneurs it's almost like, I can give up and go back to this cushy life, this cushy job, this cushy whatever. How did you maintain that mindset and push through? Is there any advice that you can give?
Yeah, it's a couple parts. It wasn't as if nobody ever tried to help me before then. I had people try to help me with my fitness, try to help me with other things. And like I said before, I just wasn't willing to be willing, because this is where my mindset was at that point. If somebody with all the best intentions suggested I do something that wasn't my default, I looked at it as an attack. I got so defensive so fast, and I wasn't coachable. I was not willing to be willing. And so you asked, like, what was the shift? And I think we've all done this either in our own personal life or with best intentions trying to help those around us. We see somebody, we see potential, and for whatever reason, it is not received in the spirit in which it was given. And it's just because that person isn't ready yet. And I think the shift for me is the pain of where I was finally became bigger than the fear and the pain of actually changing. And once I got down, and again, It wasn't like overnight and there's good days and there was bad days and there was days I wanted to give up and there was days like this sucks. And so when it was like, it wasn't so much going back to something cushy. It's easy to go back to what we know. The devil you know is better than the devil you don't. Like this sucks, but at least I know X, Y, Z, whatever reason we're not moving. And so, when I talk about helping people tell a well-crafted story, sometimes that's redefining your story, right? So I can tell you my well-crafted story of where I've come from. But me personally, I had to say, okay, this is my story up to that moment in the mirror. What's the next 3 chapters? I have the power to rewrite this story. The book doesn't have to end here. And so many people think wherever they are, for me, I felt behind at 22. As I moved back in with my parents, I had other friends that were off like pursuing their dreams. I lost 100 pounds, got to New York City. I still felt behind because there I am 30 years old thinking, I lost the weight. I'm in New York. I'm pursuing my dream. But I found myself like passing out chocolates at 6 a.m. in Times Square just to try to make rent while I had friends on Broadway and doing other things. And it was just one of those things that says, okay, my timeline is different than these other people. But it's so easy to think they're doing something I'm not, or they're better than I am because they got it faster. But I had a mentor one time that said, the problem with success is a little bit. And what I mean by that is some people who have success super early in something, it's great. And then when I would mentor people, I would be concerned for people that got really early wins. And this is why. It's not that it wasn't great they got a win. It's they didn't stay coachable. They had a little bit of success. They're like, oh, I got this now. And they didn't have the stomach for the fight when they didn't have their tough times early, but it was going to come later. And so sometimes when you have that super early win, you don't stay coachable. You don't have that stick through, that tenacity to when that hiccup comes. So the fact that I struggled a ton early, it was reps, it was callous. I joke that my time auditioning in New York City prepared me so much to be an entrepreneur and to be self-motivated and self-employed, because I got real immune to hearing no or not right now, or in an audition situation, you just hear thank you, and then you go on and you don't get cast. So, but that really prepped me for this world as well. And so I think it was just finally being coachable, and finally the pain of where I had been got so great. I'm like, cool, whatever's on the other side of this different lifestyle or different mindset has got to be better than this.
Dropping bombs, Jimmy. I love it. I think that's probably one of the actual best pieces of advice that I've heard on this podcast is willing to be willing. It just speaks so much truth for closed-minded individuals. I'm going to start saying that for any investments or people asking my advice.
Yeah,
you need to be willing to be willing. What does that mean? I'm so glad you asked.
I'm so glad you asked.
There's a guy that I know. You got to talk to him.
He'd be willing.
But and we can't force that for anybody, right? That's my point. And I would think, where would I be now if I didn't wait till the third time I dropped out of college and was 100 pounds overweight and whatever reason. And it was funny. I always had, people don't call them excuses, they call them reasons, right? I had reasons why I was heavy. I was like, oh, I grew up in West Texas, Lard's a food group. My parents fed me this. It wasn't my fault that I was heavy. Right. I had reasons that I struggled in college. I'm like, well, I'm trying to hold down 2 jobs and go to school and be in the theater department. So these kids whose parents are paying for everything, of course I used to wear this really weird badge of honor that everything was harder for me than somebody else. And for some reason, it made me feel better about my lack of success because I had this lame ass crutch to go on because I just assumed, everything was easier for other people. As we all know, everybody has their own demons nobody talks about. So these people that I thought had it easy, they had different struggles I had no clue about.
Real quick, I want to talk about coaches because Vin's comments about bad coaches and good coaches that we talk about on this show are so powerful. And you said that you've helped on your journey. Have you experienced bad coaches, good coaches? Can you shed more light into them actually helping you transition into this mindset and getting into this successful mentality here?
Yeah. One of my favorite questions, it's one that kind of drives me nuts, but I love it when somebody asks, is when I first started investing in myself, coaching, that I had no, financially, there was no reason for me to start going to personal development events or invest in coaching. I had maxed out multiple credit cards. It was just a wing and a prayer. But anytime somebody says, is it worth it? Hey, I heard about so-and-so's mastermind. Is it worth it? I heard about that event. Is it worth it? And I always think respectfully, it's the stupidest question. because it's not the responsibility of the person teaching and the coaching to necessarily make it worth it or not. And that's when people, like, even as somebody that's mentored somebody, I was like, I'm going to make it worth it. Regardless of what it is, I'm either going to be the best student, so therefore I get more access to the person running it. Like, I'm really good at relationships because I go into a community and I become the model since I become in that community what that coach hopes all their people are going to be. I'm going to do the work. I'm going to be the encourager. And all of a sudden I get more access to the person I'm paying. Or at the event, I'm going to bring the energy. I'm going to network. I'm not going to stay in my thing. I'm going to do the work. And so I think we've all been a part of a mastermind or got a course or something where we're like, this wasn't exactly what the vision they painted. I think there's a lot of that in our industry that kind of drives me nuts, but I've just gone, cool. I can't control that. What I control is whatever I paid for and I actually am getting access to, how do I maximize that? And so I have been blessed with a lot of really fantastic mentors, but I do not leave it up to that mentor to say whether or not it was a good experience or I got something out of it.
That's such an important point, because I'll even speak on this for myself, and hopefully this is for the listeners out there and it really helps some of you guys. I've had clients that have signed up with me and then they would come to session. I'd be like, so, and maybe it'd be a little while in, right? And I'd be like, so what are we going over? What are we discussing? If there wasn't like a direct action item or homework from last session, right? And they'd be like, well, I don't really have anything. Why don't you just tell me something? I'd be like, what? What am I supposed to do with that?
Yeah.
And you hit it perfectly on the head, because coaches aren't responsible for creating change in people. We're responsible to facilitate a space for change to occur.
Yeah.
And the change that occurs comes at the heels of the student that's in there. And if you're showing up and you're like, well, I don't have anything to talk about, I was hoping you could just teach me something. What am I going to teach? You know what? Next time somebody says that to me, actually, I just got a great idea. I'm going to pull out an algebra book. I'm just going to start reading the math equations.
I did have a coach one time early on call me out. I signed up for like the highest tier of this coaching program. And she and I got on the phone and she's like, what are you doing right now? I was like, oh, I'm sitting in traffic. I'm driving. She's like, really? She's like, you invest this much money and you schedule a call when you knew you weren't going to be somewhere where we could attentively actually work. And I was like, oh, and that wasn't on her because I chose not to be somewhere where I could be taking notes and be active. Because for me, I was like, well, I'm checking a box. I'm on my coaching call. And I remember I was stuck in traffic here in Dallas in the rain, so I'm not even paying attention to her. I'm trying to make sure I'm not hitting anybody. And she's just like, why did you invest in this if this is how you're going to show up to these? And I was like, damn. And it was tough, but she was right.
Yeah, no, it's 100% true. I'm glad you brought that point up. So I guess with that being said, you said a few really great points of how people can maximize how they can maximize their investment in coaching. Question that I have for you is that you are the coach, Jimmy. And what are some of the main things that you love to coach on, or that you yourself even look for within your own ideal clients? Like what makes somebody a great client, aside from some of the things you already mentioned?
Yeah, and it's been such a transition over the past about year and a half. So, and you and I have talked about this some, Vin, is like, as I've expanded and, it started in the fitness world and the network marketing world. And what I've realized specifically over the past 6 years is working in industries like financial advisors, real estate investors, real estate agents. Like, I made a list the other day of probably 40 industries of helping people dive in with their story and their messaging that I had limiting beliefs. I was like, oh, what I do only works in this niche, right? And what I've realized is my ideal person to work with is just that person that wants to have a bigger impact and reach more people and is willing to be a little vulnerable and do something a little out of the box. Because when I talk about storytelling, it's really easy for a financial advisor to go, oh, what is I just go to my numbers, right? What does storytelling have to do with that? Or I was speaking here at a high-end net worth investment meeting the other day. And people were pitching about all this great technology or fast food things they could be. And it was I was sitting in the back of the room. I got to do my talk first. And it was so crazy that the people that led with the story versus led with a spreadsheet, or led with a story versus just went straight to their numbers. When I watch a speaker, I don't necessarily just watch the speaker. I watch the audience, and I could see Even the most analytical people would still lean in if there was some story element or somebody willing to share a time they messed up, right? And I think people want to come in, and especially in this world, like, hey, they're trying to raise hundreds of millions of dollars. So they're trying to make everything polished and everything's a chart. But I was like, if I'm going to invest this money, I want to know who you are, right? Because all of this stuff is great. I talk about this all the time. My parents have been in real estate for 30 plus years. And when I work with a real estate agent, I say, look, I know it's not if, but when there's going to be a hiccup in this process. I said, so instead of just coming in and just telling me who your brokerage is or telling me how you're going to get me the most for my house, a lot of times we'll sit down and we'll find a time in their life. We'll find a personal story. Sometimes it has nothing to do with your business too. This is what I love about this. We'll find a personal story where they did everything they were supposed to. Maybe it was as a kid or in college, and some external outside variable is why something kind of went haywire and how they overcame it. So they're starting with this cute story, right? And then they'll get into their content and they'll talk about their actual business, the analytical parts, the nuts and bolts. But at the end, in that close, when you're trying to ask somebody to do business with you, we can bring it back to that personal story and say, hey, look, I'm not going to promise you that with me, you listing your house with me means there's not going to be any hiccups. What I can promise you is you and I are going to do everything by the book. Everything's going to be on time. And if somebody else has something that makes this thing go haywire outside of there, you and I are going to overcome it just like I overcame it in that story. And this is why you want me in your foxhole. And it's just that emotional tie back in that people go, cool. Because people do, even the most analytical people do business with people, right? I was talking to a buddy of mine the other day and he works on like big, he's like, this is business to business stuff. I said, dude, businesses are still run by individuals. And even the most analytical of us are emotional decision makers. Analytical people make emotional decisions, just justify it with their numbers and their analytics, right? So we as human beings, if we can connect on an emotional level, man, it's crazy how the business will grow and you'll have more impact as well.
You know, I got a question for you. I think one thing that's interesting to me is I've come to find that there are formulas to speaking. Mm-hmm. So I don't actually, even to the listeners, I don't know if you guys even know this, but I was trained under two of the best speakers in the world. I was trained under Les Brown. I was trained under Nick Santanastasso. And
you know both those guys.
I mean, they're the best, right? Or they're some of the best. And it's interesting because I learned the format, which is story, teach, and tool. Mm-hmm. And that is how I formulated every single talk. And I'm just curious, do you utilize that same format? And is there something different than you add? A little bit of the Jimmy pizzazz? Like, what's your process for building a speaker or a great speech?
And that's great. I think everybody kind of has their own proprietary process, but sometimes it's some version of something. Sure. I've had mentors like Bo Eason, who comes from a very theatrical background. Like he and I, who's very kind of performative. I tend to go that way just because so when people see me on a stage, I take up the stage. They're like, oh, you're very theatrical. I'm like, well, that's just me. But what I love about when I work with somebody is they'll see me talk and I'm like, I'm not going to make you me. I'm not trying to if you're not theatrical, because somebody will come to me and be like, oh, I want to be a great speaker like Tony Robbins or like Gary Vaynerchuk. And I'm like, they're a type of speaker. And I said, but Brene Brown's a brilliant speaker and couldn't be more different than those two guys, or Simon Sinek. And I said, so I think what I want to do is find the heart of that person and how can we expand what is naturally you? Because if you're not boisterous or you're not super theatrical, or you look at Gary or somebody like, oh, I got to cuss a lot, or I got to be, but not because we as an audience can smell the minute you're fake. Like this doesn't, I've never met you, but this just doesn't fit with the energy. And so I think for me, it is storytelling. I do have a 5 C's that I sit down with every client and go through. And that first part is clarity. The 2 questions I ask somebody the very first time we start is, who is your ideal audience and what problem are you solving? And I think people skip that step. And then they start talking in jargon of their industry, right? Let's get real clear. Who's the person? And not only what problem do you solve, but how can you say the problem the way your ideal client would, not how we would. Because we use jargon and words that we think everybody knows, and it's just because we live in our bubble. And I have to remind myself of this all the time. If you're talking to a life coach and they're using marketing words like mindset, I was like, dude, nobody's waking up at 2 a.m. going, you know what? I need a better mindset. They're talking about overwhelm and stress. It's like, how would they describe it to their buddy over a beer? How would they describe it to their spouse in the middle of the night? And if you can lock in on, and don't say your solution. Here's another silly example. If I work with a health and fitness coach and they go, what problem do you solve? And they're like, the problem I solve is healthy eating. Healthy eating is not a problem, kids. It's like binge eating, a pack of Doritos watching Netflix. There's your problem. And so for me, I think that I feel like what sets me apart from a lot of other speaking coaches, and there's so many great people out there, it's that piece, that clarity piece, and how do we speak the client's language? And then the story part is my favorite. And I don't want to make people me. I joke that as a coach, I volley better than I serve. And this is what I mean by that. That the minute you start talking or I start seeing a speaker, I go, ah. And I jokingly call myself the story chiropractor. I'm not going to rewrite everything for you. I just want to go, just move that part there. And this needs to go. That's where you lost your audience. And I feel like that's the gifting I've been given is once I watch a speaker, I'm like, I know exactly where you got disconnected with your audience. Let's just fix that one little part and get you back out there and running.
Yeah, we need to give you a nickname of the doctor. I mean, the fact that you can pinpoint where this would go wrong and how it would be better is incredible. I want to circle back to what you said as far as people selling to people, because it's absolutely true. They don't buy products. They buy from people. They buy the trust. It's how it's presented to them. And I couldn't agree more. What you're saying is it's like a multifaceted outside of just public speaking. It's in day-to-day sales. It's in life and building relationships. And it's getting it down to the basics of making it so simple that you're just talking to a person, but making it relatable by telling a story.
Yeah.
I wanted to say that comment. I'm just absorbing everything that you're saying. And it's so simple and easy.
We were talking about how all of us were at the same with David Meltzer, right? What I love about Meltzer is that dude, he deals in the hundreds of millions of dollars of types of business that he deals with, but he may be one of the most personable guys I've ever met in my life.
Absolutely.
Just feel like a friend. I mean, the minute I met him, I was emceeing a gig in Virginia backstage, and I kind of knew of him, but I didn't really know him. And and he was sitting back there, going back to sports, Shane. He's backstage and he had brought Austin Eckler with him. So I'm like, cool. I want to sit and talk to the NFL guy, right?
Yep.
And but David and I just connected on just this really personal level real quick. And he seemed interested and he told me a funny story and it was like, cool. And that's the gateway to it all comes back to just think of storytelling as another tool for relationship building, because that's something you can relate with me. One thing that I'm going to go back. One thing that I do a little differently that some speaking coaches will tell you not to tell a story that everybody in your audience can't relate with. And I disagree to an extent. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. If I had to tell a story that everybody in my audience could relate with, then I can't tell my 100-pound overweight 3-time college dropout story because I'm probably the only person in the room that has both of those things. But this is what I teach people. Perfect example. I went to a workshop and was sitting and talking with LaShawn Merritt, gold medal winner in track and field. And he was working through his story. And I said, cool. I said, you tell your story. But I said, there's a strategy and a technique I use when I'm working with a client is then how do you tie it back to your audience? Because you can use a phrase like, my story's not unique. For me, it was weight loss and not being able to finish school. For you, you may feel behind because, and then you can start listing things that you know are problems with your audience. And it's our job as the speaker to go, here's my story, and this is how it relates to you. This is where it ties back into you. And I think once you get really good at that technique, you can tell any story because then you're going to make it about the audience. You've introduced yourself really quickly. You've told usually there's some kind of vulnerable story. I always say in that story, you got to tell me why you're just like me. Like come alongside me and tell me why you struggled, why things suck, why you understand where I am. Tell me why you figured out something I haven't figured out and why it matters to you. Then I'm like, cool. And if you tie it into back to something I'm going through and then make the rest of the talk about you solving my problem, I'm with you.
How do you overcome fear of public speaking? Let's say that this is great. Like I was saying, it's just even great for just general. If I want to improve my networking or just day-to-day life, I think this is phenomenal to actually have. It just improves your overall betterness to be able to deliver things and build rapport and relationships. But what if I am deadly afraid of getting in front of an audience, of 20, 100, thousands of people. How do you overcome that?
Yeah.
Do I picture them naked? Do I go like the old
correct.
school?
I don't know where that ever, that's
Yes,
funny. I never know where
everyone's
that
naked.
I know it's been around for like hundreds of years at this point, but it's like, do people
feel like
do
that doesn't actually help.
Great marketing by whoever wanted to use that. I remind, going back to story, I remind people when I first started auditioning in college at my heaviest, I say that I used to get I knew I wanted to be in front of people, but I would get so nervous. I would have this involuntary like leg twitch, like this would start happening to my leg and I would feel stupid. I remember there was an audition where I was supposed to have an entire monologue memorized and I didn't. And I came up there with my little piece of paper and this is going on. And I'm like, you just like, stop. And the only way to get over it is reps. And here's the other thing, how I feel like I differentiate myself from other speaking coaches. I can come in and sit down and work on somebody's story. We can get all the words right. But if the first time you're delivering that is in front of your ideal audience, it's not going to be good. And so many people are not willing to be bad in order to be good on something. So often what I do, especially with private clients, is we will come in, my partner and I, and we will go through everything and say, cool, let's schedule your practice sessions. And what I mean by that is you need a safe place to be awful, a safe place to try something, to know. And it reminds me of like when I was in New York City, I used to go to a scene study class. Got a referral from here in Dallas, said, you need to go to the scene study class. I was like, okay. It was on Tuesday afternoons. And I walked in and I immediately freaked out because I recognized people in class. I'm like, she's in a soap opera. That guy's on Broadway. And I immediately like, oh my gosh, this is not the class for me. This is out of my league. And the thing that gave me the most confidence, and this always sounds kind of messed up, was watching them absolutely suck at a new piece, a new scene or a new monologue. And what I realized is like, oh, they're not better than me. They just have a safe place to try things and fail with no consequences before they get in front of people. And the thing where I said, our job is not done once we've mapped out your well-crafted story. Now we have a map. Cool. Now we got to get in reps to where it comes across conversational, to where you don't have to worry about what am I going to say next? Because if the whole thing is what's the next word, what's the next thing, then you're in your head. And the minute you're in your head, you're not taking care of your audience. And that's the other thing. I'm still nervous every time before I get on stage. And I have to remind myself, this isn't about me. Take care of them. Somebody out there today needs something you're doing. And the minute I stop thinking, what am I doing? How do I look? And I literally connect with my audience and make eye contact and talk with them. And I don't mean that as like a call and response, but we've all seen it. A speaker that talks with you versus at you. For me, then it just becomes a conversation with new friends, as if we were at a happy hour grabbing a drink, or if we were at some coffee shop. It just may happen to be 200 of them, you know?
So I got a little question for you here. What is it when you take the stage, right? And let's just say you're not, well, I guess you are speaking even as an MC, right?
I'm speaking more than any other speaker as an MC.
Right. I was going to say you are speaking, but what would you say is the biggest thing that helps when it comes to being an MC, right? Like I've come to learn, because I've been to a few events. Some of them are great. Some of them are awful. Yep. And I think the MC is usually the reason that it's a make or break scenario. So what are some of the things, like, let's say one of our listeners right now is like, oh, I want to be an MC like Jimmy. What are some of the things that a good MC should, could, and would do? And what are the steps that it takes to really get there?
Yeah, you have such a unique opportunity as an MC. And I'm hoping more and more event planners are realizing the importance of a good MC. I think for years, it was just looked at as the person that told you where the bathrooms were and when lunch was. And if you're still running your events that way, you're leaving money on the table, especially if you have an offer at the end. Because what I get to do as an MC is I get to come in and have a very different relationship with that audience than the event host, than any of the speakers. Because what I do is I position myself as the audience on stage. Hey, isn't it awesome that you and I are about to hear from all these great people? Isn't it awesome that we get to go on this journey together? And I literally bring this book and I sit backstage and I take notes. I know MCs that get backstage and just check out. I'm listening, because what I'm going to do is two things. There is a lost art form of edification. The hardest part for any speaker is the beginning of their talk. And if I can come on and tell everybody how lucky we are to hear this next speaker and all the awesome things we're going to learn, if I can get that audience already leaning forward, already taking notes, like ready to go, I've done half of that speaker's job for them. Mm-hmm. And then when they get off, I come back on and do what I call it being the human highlighter. I come back on stage and say, that was fantastic. Did you hear the part where they said boom, 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 and just make sure that I have highlighted these things. And I guess the last part of that is, if I sit down with somebody, I'm going to be a part of their event, and let's say they do have a coaching program, a high ticket offer at the end, we figure out where is the audience coming in at the beginning of this event? What are their fears? What are their problems? What is your offer at the end? And give me the reasons they wouldn't say yes. It seems like a great offer. Why wouldn't they say yes? And they start giving me these reasons. And so where I get to in between speakers is share stories of the first time I ever invested in a coaching program and how I was scared about that. It's pieces of my story that hopefully I'm breadcrumbing a bit and handling some of these objections before we ever get to the offer and doing my part to, again, they trust me as the MC. I have a different relationship with them as one of them than the speakers and the event, the people that run the event do.
Man, I love that. And I think that that's so important because there's been times that I've even spoke to hosts of events and they spend all the money on the speakers. Mm-hmm. And then they're like, yeah, we don't have any budget for an MC.
Yep.
And they just get some random person that's like, yeah, here's Jimmy. He's a speaker. All right. Like
they're just reading something. They're reading the longest bio off a.
Oh my God.
I'll have little cards, but the worst, because speakers will always give you these bios that are like 3 paragraphs long. And I always go to the speaker because it's usually their assistant that sends it. I'm like, do you really want me to say all this? And they're usually like, nope. And I always ask the speaker before they go on, how can I set you up best? What do they need to know?
Yep.
But you're right. I really hope there's a shift in the industry that start valuing what a good MC, what it really means to your bottom line. And I don't mean that like financially, yes, that offer, but the experience that your audience has, right? What do you want them transformed out of this? Why is your event going to be memorable? And there's different MCs do things different way. I'm not a huge guy, even though ironically, I was a musical theater major in college. I'm not a guy that's going to get up there and dance and get everybody to jump around. There are MCs that do that and do a great job. My job, I'm going to be entertaining. I'm going to be interactive with them. We may like goof around a little bit, but my job is just to keep them engaged mentally. And there's, again, just like speaking coaches, there's probably a few different ways to do that. But I want, whether it's working with an MC or a speaker, I want them to be authentically them. So if they're not a jump around guy and they've been told you got to go out there and dance and jump around and it feels really awkward, then your audience is like, that's awkward. But if that's who they are, rock and roll it, And so I think whether it's an MC or a speaker, it's like, let's figure out what you do really well naturally. And then how do we magnify that?
Right. I love that, man. Well, Jimmy, you've been dropping some big bombs today. And I feel like we could probably sit here and just go back and forth all day. Unfortunately, we're coming close to the end though. So I got to ask you yeah, well, it's unfortunate because we probably haven't even scratched the surface. And I'm enjoying this thoroughly because you're such a great speaker. You make this easy. Thanks. So with that being said, I got 2 final questions for you.
Okay.
As you know, the name of our podcast is called the 1% Podcast. The premise being that you don't have to be a billionaire just to be a 1%er. There's a 1% lifestyle or 1% way of life, and it's about achieving excellence greater than, 99% of others around you, or in a very different way that you deem worthy of your efforts. So my question to you is, what is your version of a 1% life?
It's being willing to try to be 1% better every day. It's too easy to have what I call 0 days where nothing went forward. There's going to be days where you get a ton done. There's going to be days where you get nothing done. But if you can move that needle 1% in your fitness, in your health, in your mindset, in your finances, business, whatever, relationships, if you can just move the needle 1% better every day, that compound effect is going to take over. And where you're going to be a year from now, just moving 1% towards where you want to go every day is so much better than the person that gets really motivated one day and works for 8 hours straight, right?
Right.
What's the old adage? An apple a day keeps the doctor away. It's not 8-hour apples on Saturday, right? It's how do we do one little thing a day and keep things going? So I think if we can move the needle 1% every day, that's going to lead us to a 1% lifestyle as well.
I'm curious because we asked this question here and there too, but I loved your advice, and that's definitely going to take it to heart as, you know, the willing to be willing. But what's the best advice that you've ever gotten?
Holy smokes.
And you can't use that one that you just did because it's so good. So you got to come up with another one.
No other.
I've been blessed with so many mentors, and I may repeat something I already said. And it was that idea of the problem with success is a little bit. I think every time I think I have it all figured out, God and the universe has a really funny way of humbling me.
Amen.
At times, whether it's a business that was around that went away, whether it's something that you just was never on your bucket and you're like, holy cow, my world just got turned upside down. It's that idea of, hey, I don't know it all. I'm 47 years old and I'm still trying to figure things out on a regular basis, you know, and embracing that. Because I think we all thought, no matter how successful somebody is or where we are in life, I think we all thought, oh, by this point in my life, I was going to be fill in the blank. And so I will go back to that idea of the problem with success is a little bit, and continue to be coachable and continue to get out of your comfort zone and do the work.
I love it. And Jimmy, everybody that's been listening to this should be dying to know this question.
Amen.
How the hell can people get in touch with you, connect with you, and potentially check out what it would be like to get coached by the one and only Coach Jimmy?
Absolutely. I know I've thrown a lot of stuff out today, and sometimes it's like drinking out of a fire hydrant. So what I've done for your audience is I have put together a PDF that goes over, you were asking that proprietary process, those 5 C's I have to tell that story. So if they just want to go to storywellcrafted.com, that's storywellcrafted.com, you can get a PDF. What it is, it's a PDF that goes right to your phone. What it does is it maps out all 5 C's. So next time you're about to do a podcast or a webinar or speak in front of 20 people, or you're about to talk to that one prospect, you can look at it on your phone and remember, here are the 5 things I need to do before I talk to that. And what that means for you is you can be really confident, whether it's a stage of 1 or a stage of 1,000, that you're going to tell the right story and have the right connection to build your business. So they just need to go to storywellcrafted.com.
I love it. What about the socials? How can people stay in touch with all the great content you put out?
The Coach Jimmy on Instagram. That is my main hub. I'm also on LinkedIn and stuff, but for the most of my activity is The Coach Jimmy on Instagram.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you so much for blessing us with your time, sharing our platform, and making it your stage for the day. It's been a great day. It's been a great podcast, and we really, really appreciated having you here. And I hope the audience got a lot. I shouldn't even say I hope. I know you guys got a lot of great information. So 100%. Make sure you do something with this. But here's a hard call out. Most of you probably won't. So don't be one of those people. Be the 1% that will. Go check out Jimmy.
The Cowboys.
What? I don't know what you're saying.
Like the Cowboys.
Like the yes.
Yeah, sure.
Go sports. There we go.
Go sports.
Sorry,
Yeah.
Jimmy, I had to.
Full circle.
I'm right there with you. The Colts too, buddy.
So, with that being said, go check out Jimmy. Go consume his content. Go grab the free resource. And as always, make sure you like, share, follow, subscribe, comment. Let us know what you thought of the episode. Let us know if you utilized any of the strategies or got Jimmy's resource. We'd love to hear from you. And please, please, please tune in next time. Thank you. As always, I'm your host, Vin, and
I'm Shane.
And that was Jimmy, everybody. See you later.
Bye, guys.
Thanks,